Good evening. Thank you for joining us again this evening for another one in our series, When Fathers Hide Their Sins, They Lose Their Sons. The Lord has allowed us to continue this series, and I'm thankful for it and looking forward to the continuation of it. This evening we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 15. And really tonight I want to talk to you about what to do when your life falls apart. What to do when your life falls apart. I'm going to give you three things, and really those three things are probably going to be a three-part mini-series within this overall series. David's life now is beginning to crumble. The sin that him and Bathsheba committed, the sin that he committed in the murder and cover-up of Uriah, the sin of the lies, the sin of the deceit, the sin of the manipulation, the sowing was happening, but now the reaping is happening. And if there's anything that any of us could learn from this character study, it would be that we're always going to reap more than we sow. And here David has gone through the pain and heartache of losing a baby. He's gone through the pain and heartache of one of his sons raping one of his sisters, or one of his daughters, who was his sister, Amnon and Tamar. He's gone through the pain of Absalom killing Amnon. He's gone through the pain of trying to reconcile with Absalom. And now Absalom has gone about, in our last message in the series, Absalom's gone about to really steal the kingdom. And he's pretty much succeeded at this point. That's where we're going to pick up tonight in chapter 15, verses 13 through 30. Now, we're not going to go over all those verses. I'll probably read it for context. But we're not going to go over all those verses. We're going to focus tonight on part 1. What to do when your life falls apart. Are you at a place in your life right now where you feel like my life is just in turmoil? Everything about my life is just falling to pieces. I have no control. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know what steps to take. I wish I had a list of things to do and to follow. Well, these next 3 messages, I believe you could apply not just to a situation, because this is a situation with David, not just to a situation that you're in this situation because it's your fault. This is coming to pass, and this is happening because of the sin that David committed. This was prophesied by Nathan the prophet, and all of this is about to come to pass. So that's not just a situation. These things aren't just for a situation of, okay, I put myself in this mess, but I believe that these are principles, these 3 mini series within the bigger series of When Fathers Hide Their Sins, They Lose Their Sons, I believe are things that any one of us could do if we find ourselves in a situation where our life is falling apart. 2 Samuel chapter 15. Let's go to our next slide. Turning from sin. Boy, this is what to do when your life falls apart. I mean, you could really sum it up in this one statement, turning from sin. If your life is falling apart because of choices, sinful choices that you have made, God is this amazing, forgiving God of second chances and third chances and a million chances. God is this God of grace and mercy, and He wants restoration to happen between us and Him. And the moment we turn from sin, James talks about this, where we resist the devil, and he flees from us, and we turn from our sin, and Paul talks about this, about turning from our wicked ways, and all of a sudden we turn, and what we find is it's almost like He's been waiting there the whole time, just waiting for us to turn back to Him. And so I would say to you that if you're in a situation, if you're watching this video and you're in a situation that, okay, your life is falling apart because of choices you made, that this is just super powerful. But if you're watching this video and you're really in a situation, because it could be either or, that your life is falling apart, not necessarily because of decisions you made, but just because life happens, because of decisions somebody else made. These are 3 things that you could do, these next 3 videos in this little mini-series, what to do when your life falls apart, that you could do to keep yourself on track, headed in the right direction. Now, let's not forget, as we look at context here, that David is in this situation because of choices that he made. He wanted a woman that wasn't his wife. He didn't listen to whoever that messenger was that came to him and said, this is not your wife. This is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. He went ahead and consummated this physical, intimate relationship. He said, go get her, bring her here. He had his afternoon of fun, at the most afternoon of fun. Maybe it was just moments of pleasure. And then things just begin to go downhill. She goes, I'm pregnant. He kills Uriah. God tells Nathan. Nathan comes in, finds out, or gives this parable to David, and David finds out that Nathan knows, and God knows, and everybody knows, and he goes and he starts the path of getting things right vertically between him and God. But all of the consequences that happen horizontally, us and other interpersonal relationships, those things still linger. They're still there. That's the damage of sin, is that God is a forgiving God. People are not very forgiving. People don't forget. People don't forgive. The old saying of forgive and forget, that's something that's rare. It's a rarity in humanity for people to forgive and forget. And so we're going to look here at what to do when your life falls apart. The very first thing, and this is the thing we're going to look at. This is the one thing in this video we're going to look at. What to do when your life falls apart. Number one. In fact, you know what? Before I even give you number one, let's read this passage. Verse 13. Absalom has stolen the hearts of the people. He's gotten them on his side. Verse 12, where we ended last week, it says, and the conspiracy was strong. People increased continually with Absalom. And verse 13 says, and there came a messenger to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And when I see this word messenger, I can't help but think about what this messenger brought to David, what this message was to David, a tearing out of his heart even more, a burden even more placed upon his shoulders. And I think about what Paul talks about, a messenger of Satan. Was David in this situation because of his own choices? Absolutely he was. But him and God had made some reconciliation. Now, he struggled to make reconciliation between him and his sons, between him and man. We'll find as the story continues that Joab loses respect for David through this process, and many other issues come out of it. And so there's this messenger that comes to David, and he says, hey, bad news. Remember the message that Bathsheba sent? Hey, bad news. Remember the message that came to David after Amnon was killed by Absalom? Hey, bad news. Over and over and over and over again, there are going to be these messengers that bring these messages. And I just wonder in my mind if David, every time he sees this person bringing a message, he's just going to be like, oh, another one. Another bad message. You ever felt like that in your life? Like, I swear, if the phone rings one more time, it's going to be the end of the world because all I've gotten is bad news today. Verse 13, a messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And verse 14 says, and David said unto his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. David had some insight into what Absalom's plan was. David here, realizing the past 7 years that had gone by, is thinking to himself, Absalom has gotten what he wanted in getting the hearts of the men, and now he's got all of the power, and he's going to use that power in an evil way to come and to smite us as his family, us as his people of Israel, and even everyone else, the whole city, with the edge of the sword. Absalom is going to be a wild man. Verse 15 says, and the king's servants said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. What a blessing this probably was to David, that there were still servants that even though he had made a lot of bad mistakes, that they said, listen, we're ready to do whatever you say. We're going to stand by you. This is a great picture of people who stand by their pastor, just knowing that their pastor is not perfect, not that their pastor committed the sins that David committed, but these servants recognized that there was fallibility in the person of David, even being the king. Even in all of the goodness that he accomplished, there was still fallibility, yet their heart was to serve the king in his place in whatever capacity that he wanted. And they said, we're ready to do whatever you say. Verse 16, and the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. This is this These 10 concubines, when the whole battle with Absalom is over and David comes back, a terrible thing happens with these concubines. But let me just interject here for a second. David should have never had these concubines. Sure, maybe they should have been in some other appointed position, but for what he used them for, you just see Solomon I think it was Brother Bontrager who made the statement this past Sunday, but others have made this statement, other preachers have made this statement before, and I don't know where it originated from, but what we do in a small amount, our children will do in excess, and we see that with Solomon when it came to having wives. And the king went forth in verse 17, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was afar off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. When David was with the Philistines, back when Saul had died, and this is an interesting part of this story, when Shimei comes out to curse David, when we get to that in chapter 16, I think it is, but when we get to that, there's a whole connection there between Shimei and Saul, and David was actually down with the Philistines when Saul died, and so there were some of these men that had come out of Gath when David was down there. They had followed him out, and now they're following him as he's leaving the kingdom. Then said the king in verse 19 to Ittai the Gittite, and just tons of great messages on Ittai. But Ittai the Gittite, wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Ittai must have been on some sort of soldier crusade or something, and he just got back home. And David is saying to Ittai, he's saying, listen, you just got back home and from war or from some battle or from some espionage trip or whatever it was that he was on. And David said, listen, now you're coming back home and you're just immediately going to go take off with us again. And you've got to be tired. You've got to be exhausted. So just go back home. And he says, seeing I go whither I may, return thou and take back thy brethren, mercy and truth be with thee. David is beginning to institute these principles of deference, and he's going to do this for the next chapter and a half. He is going to display great deference. Now, if he would have only grasped this when his sin was being conceived in his heart, when he looked at this woman who was bathing and he thought to himself, I'd like to have her, and somebody says, that's not your wife, deference in that moment should have kicked in. But it didn't, and now he's paying a price. And I believe wholeheartedly he's learned some lessons along the way. His heart is broken, his mind is broken, his body is probably broken, and he's learned some. Have you ever had something so emotionally it filled your heart with so much turmoil emotionally and mentally that it physically weighed you down? That's what I mean by physically. David was broken physically. He lost his sons, and his sons were at war with each other, and now he's losing the kingdom, and he's probably wondering to himself, is this just going to be, the end for me? Is this, what's going to happen in all of this? Where am I going? And so Ittai tells him, go back home. But Ittai in verse 21 says, and said, the Lord, as the Lord liveth, and as the Lord my king liveth, surely in what place my Lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. And David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men, and all the little ones that were with him. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. Now, when we first started reading, it did say the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. But obviously here, when we get down to verse 23, you find out that there's still some in the country who were actually with David. It says, all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over, and the king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of these verses because we're not going to get to them. But I do want to focus specifically on what's happening here. Absalom has stolen the hearts of the men. He's gone out, he stood in the gate. Anytime somebody from any tribe was coming along, he made it look like he was the person who could solve their problems. And I talked about how the devil really tries to do that in our lives. But now, the kingdom's being stolen. Now, Absalom has enough of the men, enough of the people with him, that he feels confident he can go and take the kingdom. And somebody gets wind of this, and a messenger comes and goes, David, you got a problem. Absalom's got enough people. He's coming, And whether or not he's coming and he's just going to waylay us and just beat us all, or he's going to create some type of 50-50 civil war here in Israel, he's coming. And David, thinking to himself, I've lost the baby, I've lost Amnon, I've lost Absalom, I've lost so much here, and I'm losing the kingdom. David had a heart for his people in a way that he did not want to see Absalom come in and just slay all of the people. And he mentions that. He says that Absalom would come in and kill us and kill everyone here, and even the whole country would smite with the edge of the sword. And so David, being this king who just through, no matter where he was at, he always had this personal nature about him. He was involved with people on personal levels. Where Solomon was more of kind of like a celebrity, David was more involved with people on a personal level. And so David here realizes what's happening and not wanting to have a civil war happen in Israel and not wanting to see people killed because there's a fight of pride over who the king is. David begins this deference. He begins this deference process that should have happened several chapters before this. Now, even though, and this is the point, this is the first point, what to do when your life falls apart. Even though he should have, and we can say he should have listened to the messenger who said, this is not your wife. He should have done something about Amnon and Tamar instead of just being wroth about it, not doing any actual thing. He should have talked to Absalom. He should have gone down to the feast that Absalom invited him to so that maybe this evil thing wouldn't have happened. He should have reached out to Absalom while he was out at Grandma and Grandpa's house for 3 years. He should have not allowed Absalom to come back home only to turn his face away and send him back down to his own house for 2 whole years. He should have done something for these 7 years. But here is the point. Now he's going to do something. You see, this is the overall idea. What to do when your life falls apart. Number 1, continue to charge forward. This is that little mini-series, the first thought here. This is all we're going to look at tonight. We'll look at some subpoints. But the thought tonight is continue to charge forward. David did not lay down. David did not give up. David did not sit on his throne and say, well, when he comes in, just tell him I'll be sitting here waiting on him. Tell him to come in and just chop my head off, stab me in the heart, let me have it. David's heart continued to be for those whose hearts were for him, even though he had lost the hearts of his sons, even though he had created turmoil in his family life, even though all of those things happened, he did not give up. This is what I've seen happen. Now, I'm 37 years old. I'm about to be 38 here in a little bit. And I don't know everything there is to know about everything. But I am old enough that I have seen by experience, and I have felt by experience. I have felt this way myself. People who find themselves in a situation that they have created, and bad things have happened, and they didn't listen to those who came to them and said, don't do this, and they created their own situation. Those people many times give up on God. They stop going to church. They stop reading their Bible. They stop praying. They stop having fellowship with Christian friends. They stop doing all of the things that are going to help them continue in this life. And they just give up. And they say, it's not worth it. I've messed this whole thing up. And they have this pity party. And they feel sorry for themselves. And then that's all there is to it. It's just, that's it. That was my shot and I blew it. Guess what? David blew it. But he does not lay down. He begins to defer to God. If we were to keep reading this passage here, which we will in the next couple of weeks, we would find out that David pretty much says, in fact, I'm going to paraphrase, but I'm going to be really close to getting this exactly right. He says, maybe God will let me come back, but if he doesn't, then that's God's choice. David begins to defer to God and leave the decisions up to him. This is the greatest lesson from this. What is it? Romans 15:4 that talks about all of these things. And is it 1 Corinthians chapter 11? I can't remember where it's at in Corinthians, 1st or 2nd Corinthians, that talks about all of these things in the Old Testament are there for our examples. They're there for us to learn from. And if there's anything here that we should learn from, it is this. Do not wait to start deferring to God. Do not wait to defer to God. Our pride wants to tell us we're in control. Our pride wants to tell us nobody can tell us what to do. Our pride wants to remove ourselves from any authority. Our pride wants to make us the king of our heart. Do not wait to start deferring to God. Continue. If you do wait and you find yourself in a situation where now your life has fallen apart, what do I do now, Barrett? What do I do now that my life has fallen apart? Don't give up. Start deferring to God now. If you're watching this and if you haven't made a huge mess of your life, praise the Lord for that. Continue to defer to God and let Him make the big decisions in your life. And any kind of preferential decisions He lets you make, just almost defer that back to Him. And defer to Him as much as you possibly can. You cannot go wrong saying, God, I leave the choice with you. You cannot go wrong doing that. So let's say you haven't done that, and now you're in a situation where your life is falling apart. Well, start the process of deferring. No matter how painful, because this is painful for David, his son is the one that has stolen the hearts of the people. His son is the one who killed his other son. His son is the one who now is this wild man David is talking about, going to come in and kill everybody. That's his son. This is not just some guy from another nation. This is not a situation that just happened for no reason. These are problems that David created, and this is his son. This is tearing his heart apart. But he doesn't give up. No matter how hard it gets, do not give up on God. There may be some consequences, and there may be some pain, and there may be some things you're going to have to swallow your pride and say, well, this is what I get. These are the consequences that come from the decisions that I made. But you do not give up on God. You do not stop deferring. You do not stop believing. You do not stop asking. You do not stop just whatever it is it takes to get you from here to God. Now, I want you to notice 3 things that happened as he charged forward. 1, there was the overthrow. In verse 13 it says, and there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. The overthrow is here. And you better just know and make sure you know sin is going to overthrow your life. You may be smart enough and wise enough to get away with it for a little while, but sin is going to damage your mind. It is going to damage your body. It is going to damage your relationships. It's going to damage your testimony. Sin is going to damage and bring death to everything it touches. So now we have the overthrow. This messenger, and again, I think about this word messenger and what Paul talked about, a messenger of Satan. And there's no doubt in my mind that the devil is super excited that he's got the nation of Israel in turmoil. There came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. There was the overthrow. There was somebody who was coming to steal and to take and to destroy. But David, notice as he continued to charge forward, he recognized that there was an overthrow, and he didn't say to himself, well, it's over. We might as well give up. I hate to make some type of sports analogy. I mean, most of my analogies are sports analogies, but I hate to make this here. But can I just tell you, there's been many times in a basketball game that I thought to myself, man, we're down 15 or 20, and it's halftime. And I want to say to myself, it's an impossible task to overcome that deficit. But then I also try to convince myself they got up by that much in a half and we got another half left, so I can get in there and maybe we can hit a couple shots back to back and make a game out of it. But it's not just basketball. You could say it for any sport, but you could say it for life. People who don't manage their money right. People who spend their money on frivolous things and then find themselves not being able to pay their electric bill or their water bill. People who make terrible decisions that lead to some end that they don't like, and then they say to themselves, I wish I wouldn't have done it, but I've done it now and there's no going back, and so we might as well just give up and die. No going back. It is what it is. And I submit to you that the God that we serve is a God who giveth more grace. Not that we can sin and do whatever we want and shake our fists in God's face and then turn around and say, well, bless us again, Lord. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when you find yourself, I'm not talking about a repetitive, habitual sin pattern that you refuse to give up. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is He knoweth our frame that we are but dust. And He sees our heart. And He knows that there was a desire for sin. And He knows now that there's a real desire in our hearts to get right. I mean, think about what happened with Ahab. King Ahab, for this one split moment, decides to get right with God, and God looks down from heaven, and the Bible records that God pretty much says, look at that. Look what he's doing in his heart right now. He humbled himself for just a moment. After a life of terrible wickedness and debauchery and sinfulness, and not leading the people of God in the way that they should go, but doing the very opposite, letting his wife Jezebel rule everything. For a split second, Ahab gets his heart right with God and humbles himself before God, and God takes notice of it and says, I think we'll stay the judgment to the next generation. I can't remember if it says the next generation or his children. But God noticed. That's the point. God knows when our hearts are in the right place. And here David, by this time, he is broken emotionally and mentally, and he's got so many family problems, and he doesn't know how to solve them because his bad example has strapped him and it keeps him from doing anything about it. But he still charges forward. He still makes a choice here when this news of the overthrow comes to charge forward. Secondly, notice the orders he gave. It says, and David said unto all, this is verse 14, the first half of verse 14, and David said unto all his servants that were with him in Jerusalem, arise and let us flee. He's still looking out for the people who are willing to let him look out for them. Absalom was no longer willing. We're going to find out that Ahithophel was no longer willing. We don't know that yet at this point in the story, but we're going to find it out. So we don't know that, but we're going to find out that Ahithophel no longer is interested in serving David. So there's a lot of people who are bitter against him, but there were some that stayed with him. And those that stayed with him, David still cared about them. The messenger didn't come and say, David, Absalom's got all the hearts and he's coming. And David just got up and ran out and said, every man for himself. That's not what David did. That's not what this passage tells us happened. David looks around at all those that are around him and says, okay, guys, listen, Absalom's coming. It's going to be bad. And we need to get out of here. So arise, get whatever you need to get that you can get quickly, and let us flee. Let us get out of here and let us flee. Notice also in verse 16, I didn't put it up here on the screen, but it says in verse 16, it says the king went forth and all his household after him. So it wasn't just that David told them to do this, but it was that they followed the orders. And you know what an amazing thing it is that even when we ruin relationships by our own decisions and our own choices, even when that happens, there's still some level of influence that we have. There's still some people that are willing to allow us to have influence into their lives. Not that we should excuse the sin and say, well, because we'll still have somebody that we should sin, but it's just an amazing thing that God can use us even after we have sinned. Whether it's a great sin, a small sin, a habitual sin, a regular sin, an irregular sin, whatever it is, it's an amazing thing that God still allows us to be used by him. And David said to himself, when the messenger came and said there is an overthrow, he said, I'm not going to lay down and give up, but the ones that I can help, I will continue to help. We today find ourselves in a mess. We today say to ourselves, it's the end of the world. We today don't realize that when we do that, we're still affecting other people around us. Everybody that I know, maybe there's somebody watching this that doesn't, but everybody that I know loves an underdog story. Everybody that I know loves a comeback story. People love stories like that. Somebody was down and out, but somehow they pulled themselves out. And I just submit to you, you and I may not be able to pull ourselves out of a problem, but there's a God in heaven that has all power and all wisdom to pull us out of the dirt and the mire and put us in heavenly places. There is a God in heaven that we serve. If you're not saved, if you're watching this, you're not saved, you need to get saved. The death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ. He died on the cross for your sin. He was buried. That blood that he shed, that was the blood that is the fountain that will pour forth and cover your soul and make you right and just before God. But that he died, that he was buried, and that he said to death on the third day, nice try, small fry. And he opened his eyes and he sat up and the stone was rolled back and he walked out and he showed himself to over 500 people. And he stood on the side of a hill and he ascended, and the angels told the people who were standing there with their mouths wide open, what in the world are you doing? He's coming back just like he went up. And I'm telling you right now, I believe it as the day is long. And I can't wait till he comes back. But if you're watching this and you're not saved, that's a very short and sweet explanation of what we talk about the gospel is. You got to recognize there's sin in your life and that there's a sin nature and sins you've committed and all that. But this part here where we're talking about continuing to charge forward. David didn't have the Holy Spirit. This is not a New Testament verse. These are principles that we apply to our life. They're not promises that God tells us. This is Old Testament principles. They're there for our example. They're there for our learning. And so when we look and see what does the Scripture say, we see some things that David did. And if your life has fallen apart and you're not saved, you need to get saved. And secondly, if your life has fallen apart and you are saved, here's some principles that you can do. You can turn to God and charge forward by the grace of God and the power of the Holy Spirit who lives within the temple of God, which is your body. David said unto all his servants, here were the orders. And listen, you may have lost some of your kids, you may have lost a spouse, you may have lost, and I don't mean lost like they died, I just mean lost because your bad example and bad decisions turned them away from you and caused them wrong. But can I tell you, you can still run to God. And God still has the power and the wisdom and the ability to turn the hearts of children to their fathers and the hearts of the fathers to their children and to reconcile things and to see restoration happen. But you've got to get that voice and that thought out of your head that says it's not possible. It is possible. Continue to charge forward in the power of God. When I say charge forward, I don't mean that you find some champion within you. There's no champion in there. The champion that's in there is the champion of Christ. So you yield your members and say, God, by your power and by your grace, and through your power, I'm going to move forward in faith, one step at a time, deferring to you all the decisions. And then I'm going to give, no matter what the messenger of Satan comes and says, here's all the reasons why you should give up. And here's all the reasons why you should lay down. I am going to continue to give the orders to whoever I can, even if the orders are to my own heart. I am going to give those orders to trust God and protect yourself by staying under the shadow of the Almighty. Now, thirdly, notice the obstacles. He says, charge forward. There's overthrow. Now here's some orders. Here's what I need you to do. But do not miss that there were obstacles. What were the obstacles? Notice what it says here. Lest he, Absalom, overtake us suddenly. We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here quick because he's coming quick. And unless he shows up and then all of a sudden we can't get away and he overtakes us suddenly, we need to get out of here now. He says, lest he, Absalom, overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us. Well, that evil, I don't know how you get around it. He's pretty much going to kill us. And smite the city, not just us, but all of Jerusalem, with the edge of the sword. He's going to take his vengeance. He's got so much bitterness, and he's got so much anger. He's got so much vengeance in his heart that he's looking for an opportunity to kill me, all of us here, and even the whole city. But maybe if we get out of here before he gets here, maybe he'll walk into an empty kingdom. Maybe he'll walk into an empty palace, and he'll just make himself king, and he won't kill anybody. Maybe if we get out of here and we just defer, it will somehow create some type of peace. And I see so much here what Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount with blessed are the peacemakers. David is trying at this point in his life, all the decisions and all of the terrible mistakes and sin that he committed led to this. But now he's in this position where he says, yes, I did all these things. And yes, this is my fault. But I am going to charge forward by the grace of God and the power of God by yielding my members and bringing every imagination into the captivity of Christ and deferring and letting God make all the decisions that are left to be made. Even though I'm in this situation because of my own fault, I am deferring to God on every level. And there's still obstacles. What are the obstacles? One, it's his son. It's his son. David wants to be reconciled with his son. And some people will look at their situation and say, maybe there's some way. Maybe there's some way we can fix this. And they try to use logic, and they try to use their ability maybe to communicate or try to tug on the heartstrings. David does not do that. David defers this choice to God. He defers it to him. And he says, listen, if he shows up, and there's something, I know David is a man. He is a father. There's something in David, in his heart, that is just being pulled in every direction. And I'm certain, even though the Bible doesn't say this, and maybe I'm wrong on this, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I just feel confident knowing the type of character that David was, and the type of person he was, and what a great personality he had, and how he was always involved with everybody's life, that I just know there's something in his heart that says, maybe I can fix this. And that is the lie the devil wants you to believe. You can fix this. No. Only God. Only God. Take those thoughts and say, God, if you put me in a place that you make me a vessel unto honor to fix it, that's one thing. But God, if I'm going to try to take the ball from your hands and run down the field and think I'm going to make it to the end, one man on 11, God, I just don't, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to fix this situation. And David here, I know there was an obstacle in his heart that said, this is my son. This is my son. And we don't have, the Bible doesn't tell us much about anything at all about Absalom's childhood. But I feel confident that there was something that happened between David and Absalom. They had this great relationship when he was younger, and David longs for him. And all of the way that David behaves towards Absalom are ways that indicate to us there was some tight bond that these two had when they were younger. Yet the obstacle was there. His son. It was his son. What other obstacles are there? Well, there's the people. Well, Absalom's going to come in here and kill us. But there's also the people. He's going to come in and he's going to smite the city with the edge of the sword. So there's the son, and there's the smiting, and there's the sword. All of this is going to happen. And David said, if we don't do something about getting out of here quick and letting God get in the middle of this whole situation, if we don't make the decision to get out of here, there's going to be a civil war, and Absalom's going to come in here and he's going to kill us, and he's going to kill the whole city. There is nothing that we can do. That is a great place to be. Not that his sin led him to that, but that thought, there is absolutely nothing that I can do. That place should propel you to walking, running, finding, seeking, whatever the word you want to use is, the presence of God. Because He is the one who can do something about it. He is the one that has the ability. You and I, maybe we can massage a situation long enough to keep things looking like they're peaceful, but we cannot touch the heart. We cannot touch the mind the way that God can. When God draws someone to the Lord Jesus, it's a holy drawing power. When we try to push someone to Jesus, there's a resistance because it's human power. You see, God has to be the one that does all of this. And this is a foreign concept to our Western American Christianity, because our Americanism and our nationalism wants to tell us, well, everything that you want, you should work for. Well, what if the things we wanted were spiritual in nature? Well, yeah, there's a choice that we make. There's decisions that we make. But ultimately, the Bible even tells us a lost man can't understand, a carnal man can't understand the things of God because they're spiritually discerned. They're spiritually discerned. There's this connection that the Bible talks about over in Romans about yielding your members, where the moment that we yield to God is the moment that the divinity of the Holy Spirit who lives within us kicks in and begins to be lived out through us. But we have to yield. We have to bring our thoughts into the captivity of Christ. We have to yield our members. And we have to say, this decision is not mine to make. I will make the decisions that I can make while I'm here. But certain decisions I can't make. So those decisions will be God's. That is what charging forward is. Charging forward is not making it work. Charging forward is believing God can make it work. Not that God will make it work, but He's your only hope. He's my only hope. And even if you're watching this and you say, Brother Barrett, I don't really feel like my life's falling apart. I feel like things are as good as they've ever been. Well, let me just continue to say, you're there because of God. Not because you built it, not because someone helped you build it, but because of God. Because God used you, because God used me, because God used somebody else in our lives. It's always, and it will always be, God who does all of this. In us, through us, by us, sure. There's a part that we play. There's decisions that we make. that can quench the Spirit of God or can give the Spirit of God liberty in our lives. I get that. I'm not saying that he's a puppeteer. What I am saying is the heart of man says, God, I'd rather you choose. I'd rather you choose. And we see this about David from this point on. And maybe I'm wrong. I've read it many times. But from this point on, what I read about David's life is that almost every choice he makes, he makes in the aspect of, I'm going to let God decide that. I'm going to let God decide what the punishment's going to be. I'm going to let God decide where we're going to go. I'm going to let God decide all of that. So I'll just close with this. What do you do when your life falls apart? You charge forward in faith. Don't let the things of life tell you there's no reason to go back to church. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Your preacher's up there preaching the Bible, and he's out talking to people about the Lord, and he's setting a good example, and he's a qualified man. You ought to praise God for that man, and you ought to submit yourself under the authority of a local New Testament, Bible-believing pastor who will love you and love your family and love the people and will disciple you and teach you. You ought to have a thankful and grateful heart that God's given you such a man. Does that man have problems? I'm sure he does. He's a man, just like me. I got problems. I'd rather not say them on this video for the whole world to see, but I got problems. Still, it's a matter of faith. I'm going to show up down there at that church. I'm going to sit as close to the front row as I can get. I'm going to go down to the altar every time God deals with my heart. I'm going to open my Bible and read it even when it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to keep praying even when it feels like my prayers aren't getting past the roof. I'm going to keep talking to God. I'm going to keep crying out to God. I'm going to keep seeking and pursuing God because the Bible tells me this. You'll find me. Jesus speaking here. He says, you'll find me when you seek me with all your heart. And when you and I put our lives in turmoil and flip our own worlds upside down, and we find ourselves in a place where our worlds are falling apart, we want to give up, and we don't want to seek him with all our heart because we don't want to deal with the consequences. We don't want to deal with accountability. We don't want to deal with responsibility. These are important things to deal with. Eventually, we're going to get to a message that I've titled How to Deal with Consequences. Eventually, I'm going to get to that because that's one thing that people don't want to do. When I talk about charging forward in faith, people say, well, it's hard. And what they're saying when they say it's hard is, I don't want to deal with the consequences. And I am going to show you this passage gives us some examples and some principles, and I could even give you a list of how to deal with consequences. How do I deal with them? I got things right here, vertically between me and God, but I got problems horizontally. How do I deal with those consequences? We'll get to that. But first, before we learn how to deal with consequences, you've got to make a decision in your heart that you're going to charge forward in faith. Your life is falling apart, sure, and it's your own fault. Okay, welcome to the club. I'm not here to bash you, and this isn't a David bashing series. I am here to tell you there's some lessons we can learn from this, and one of the things David did was he did not give up. He didn't give up. He didn't give up. When his whole world was falling apart, when his whole life was falling apart, when we could look at in self-pity say, well, if he would have given up, I wouldn't have blamed him. He didn't. He continued to charge forward in faith. Well, I hope that this mini-series here, this part of this, when fathers hide their sins, they lose their sons, we got a little three-sermon mini-series, what to do when your life falls apart. I hope this has been a blessing to you and a help. I hope that you can continue to turn in. It's not bedtime. Tune in. I think this will be a great blessing and help to you. And I know it has been to me many times. It's helped me, and the Lord's been good to me and taught me a whole lot through this. So I pray that it's a blessing. I hope that you can tune in next week as we pick up our next message. This tonight was what to do when your life falls apart, part 1, charge forward. Next week we're going to see what to do when your life falls apart, part 2, surround yourself with Christian friends. God bless you. Have a good night.